Rest Stop with Brad Restituto.
7 years. Handoff. Damian Williams trying to get to the edge. Breaks a tackle. 35, 30. Damian Williams, 20. Stays in bounds. 15, 10, 5. Touchdown! Kansas City!
And the snap goes high over the head of Big Ben, all the way back to the 2, to the 1, and the Browns have it in the end zone, and they dive on the ball and recover it for a touchdown! Carl Joseph's got it in the end zone, a touchdown!
Derek looks left, Derek gonna throw for the end zone! Caught! It is caught! Touchdown!
Welcome to the Rest Stop. It is Tuesday, January 26, 2021, and we're with you live, 9 o'clock Pacific time here in Las Vegas. Myself, Spencer the Wiz, every Tuesday and Thursday, and I've got to thank Spence for that new opening we just rolled out tonight. Same little background music, some different characters in the beginning, but we got a good football-laden, heavy show for you tonight. Going to recap NFL Championship Sunday as we have our Super Bowl contestants lined up in Tampa 2 weeks from now. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, their first team ever to host a Super Bowl and play in that same Super Bowl, taking on the Kansas City Chiefs. We'll get into some deep detail of the games that happened this past Sunday and what it means for the legacy of these great quarterbacks and the great teams really that were there, the Final Four left standing. So joining me as always, Spencer the Wiz. Follow him on Twitter at Spencer the Wiz. Follow myself at Brad the Believer. If you miss any part of this show live, make sure that you check out the podcast version on Google Podcasts, Audio Boom, Spotify, iTunes. Make sure you search Landry Football Conference Call, and the Rest Stop will be underneath there, and go to LandryFootball.com. And also download the Twitch app to give us support and search Landry Football, and then the Rest Stop will be underneath there. Spence, without further ado, let's get into it. Let's start off in the NFC. And Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they outlasted Green Bay in Lambeau Field. 31-26 was the final 5-point victory for Tampa Bay. They cover as a 3.5-point underdog. They win outright on the money line. And I was not on the right side in our picks last week. And I went against myself because, Spence, we posted a clip from November 24th show where you asked me, and you were calling Tom Brady noodle arm for much of the season. You were not a believer. I, on the other hand, has always been a believer in Tom Brady. I don't know what happened this past week, but during that clip, I pronounced my infatuation for what Tom Brady can do come playoff time. And he's done exactly that, as Tampa Bay will be in the Super Bowl 2 weeks from now, this past Sunday. Were you surprised, Spencer the Wiz? What were your thoughts on the game? And now that Tom Brady is going to be playing, I believe, in his 10th Super Bowl, which is absolutely unbelievable. And we'll talk about where Tom Brady's legacy is at this point, how great he truly is. And I'm excited to talk about that. But Spence, about the game, in the first half, Tom Brady was lights out. He was just on point from the go. He regressed a little bit in the second half. A lot of people will talk about his interceptions. 2 of those were off the hands of his receivers, so I don't put the blame completely on him. But he was on fire and built a big lead in that first half. Spence, what were your thoughts on the game?
Yeah, when you look at the stat sheet, it doesn't actually favor Tampa Bay at all. I mean, 3 interceptions, and Aaron Rodgers have 1. And really what cost them the game for the most part, put them in really good field position. It doesn't surprise me. Tom Brady is he exudes excellence. That's kind of the big takeaway. Like, for some reason, he's just able to captivate the attention of his players so well. And everyone just wants to play well for him. Very few guys have that ability. Even some of the all-time greats don't really have that. The only other person in my lifetime, at least I've seen with my own eyes, is LeBron James. Like, guys just want to play well when they're around him. And the Buccaneers defense just stepped up. I mean, getting hot in the postseason, it usually happens one team every season, and it's them for the most part. I mean, the Chiefs played okay. They're still not playing fantastic. We'll talk about them. But is this the most shocking result in playoff history to me? No, it's not. They have all the tools necessary to beat any team.
Spence, and they did this without two safeties. Antoine Winfield Jr. did not play in the game because of an ankle injury, and they lost their backup safety in that game. But defensively for Tampa, Jason Pierre-Paul got to Aaron Rodgers on the edges. They got pressure on Rodgers in key moments, and they really kind of slowed down Devontae Adams for the most part. And Green Bay had to play from behind. It was two crucial plays. The touchdown with under 10 seconds left in the first half, where Arians decided to be aggressive. Arians and Brady threw a dime to Scotty Miller for a touchdown. That was a backbreaker. And then, of course, the Aaron Jones fumble to start off the second half led to points for Tampa Bay. Green Bay had opportunities. They had turned Tampa over 3 times, but only scored 6 points. That's not going to get it done in a game like this. And you can say whatever you want. Most people don't play in the NFL 10 years. To go to 10 Super Bowls, it's unbelievable. And I want everybody listening right now, and if you're not listening live, make sure, Spence, you get this clip ready for future references, because unarguably, without question, Tom Brady is the greatest sports athlete ever to live, ever to be born, ever to play sports on this entire planet. And I'm going to tell you why. Number one, I don't care what athlete you want to put against Tom Brady. Michael Phelps, Olympian, fine. Serena Williams, fine. Andre Agassi, Rafael Nadal, LeBron James, Wilt Chamberlain. Go down the list, Spencer the Wiz, of all the greatest athletes you've ever known. Let me tell you one thing that's going to make this a slam dunk argument case done and over with, okay? The game of professional football is physically and mentally probably the most demanding sport of all time. And every single sport, Spencer the Wiz, when you retire, when you're an old man, a young man, do people not play these games recreationally? Basketball, we could play pickup games anytime. Old men, they get out and play tennis, play golf. You have old man hockey leagues. You could do any sport pretty much if you're retired, old, or young. You want to know what sport you can't and which doesn't happen is tackle football. You can play flag football. Playing tackle football doesn't happen on everyday side of the road pickup games leagues. One main reason, you got to sign a waiver. There's big time health liability. So for Tom Brady, and also one of the major sports, Spence, that it's only a 1-game playoff. Aside from March Madness, there's no 7-game series like basketball. There's no 5-game baseball series. You've got one shot to play 60 minutes as the guy that touches the ball more than any player on the team to get your team together in whatever facet or capacity and get them to victory in whatever way possible. Now, is Tom Brady perfect in Super Bowls? No. But to get to that big game in your first time in the NFC conference with this team, after you've taken the Patriots and created them into a dynasty, it'll never be duplicated in our lifetime. To say it'll never, ever happen in the history of sports, I don't know that I could say that. I will say in our lifetime, in your kid's lifetime, and anybody listening, their kid's lifetime, you will never see this again from a professional football player. Tom Brady is unquestionably, unheralded, the greatest sports athlete and champion ever to live. Is he the greatest athlete as far as athletic prowess? Of course not. He is the greatest athlete ever to play any sport in any game whatsoever. And I think a lot of the greats probably will agree with that sentiment, Spencer the Wiz.
Well, I like the passion you're bringing into it, man. It's great. I'm not a huge Tom Brady fan. Like, the Tuck rule killed me forever. But still, I have to, give credit where credit's due. I think the thing that makes this the most impressive is not only his age that he's doing it at, it's the fact that he just handpicked a football team, was like, hey, do you guys just want to go to a Super Bowl? I can make it happen. And it wasn't just him. They didn't just him going there. It was all the players that followed him because they know how good he is. And just, I don't even know if he was involved in the draft process, but to get Tristan Wirfs and Winfield, it just, wherever he goes, the right decisions seem to happen. And you have to imagine that he has his hands dipped and at least saying who he thinks he wants when it comes to player personnel. But it doesn't matter who's on his team, right? I mean, this is a guy who, let's compare him to Michael Jordan. I feel like that's the greatest argument you can make because he went to 6 and he won 6, never lost. But when he went there at the end of his career to the Wizards, they were terrible. The guys didn't like playing with him. So to have the success to go along with all of your teammates liking you and wanting to be good for you, I think actually does put him over the great Michael Jordan in terms of just athlete, not, like you said, not like physically, but just in terms of the sport. Again, I think another argument you can make is LeBron James. This is a guy who's gone to 3 different teams and won championships for them. So that's going to be the closest argument you can get. And especially if LeBron wins MVP. I mean, these guys are kind of neck and neck, in my opinion. If LeBron can do it back to back, I think there is an argument you can make, because I find these two so similar in terms of how much they put into their body, especially how much they dedicate their lives to being good in their old age when so many people don't. And it's kind of obvious. Of course you don't. I mean, who wants to spend every single day thinking about next year, and how competitive you can be next year? Almost nobody. And that's what makes them stand out above the rest. But if Tom Brady does do this, if he goes through Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, and Pat Mahomes in one offseason, there's no question about football. I mean, this guy basically beat everybody who said any argument against Tom Brady is almost those 3 quarterbacks exactly. I can't think of any other ones. And definitely Russell Wilson's definitely not in that conversation. So if he beats all 3 people that people say he might be better than him, then there is no argument. He is the GOAT, even though he already is. And the fact that he's doing that at his old age. So this is one of the most impressive runs in sports history. And I just have to appreciate it for what it is, because, again, this probably won't happen in our lifetimes unless Pat Mahomes ends up, bouncing in the last year of his career and makes it happen too. Or if he wins another Super Bowl here, then of course he's going to start building his resume. But for now, this is one of the best runs in sports history.
I actually agree with you, Spence, with LeBron James. If he continues to do what he's doing, I think him and Brady will be as the top 2. And Chris Wynn, what are you talking about? He is the absolute, without question, the greatest athlete ever. 10 Super Bowl appearances in the NFL, the most grueling mentally and physically demanding sport ever. And for a quarterback to be involved in 10 games, it's like nothing that's ever been done or will be duplicated in our lifetime in the game of NFL football. A 1-game playoff. Are you kidding me? It's not even a question. You can't name me anybody. You could go on and they're all wrong. None of them have come close to what Tom Brady has done, going to the Super Bowl as many times, the biggest game possible. Did I say he's the most athletic player ever? No. I said he's the greatest sports competitor, the greatest sports athlete champion ever to live in any sport. Anybody you could think of doesn't even come close to what Tom Brady's done at 43 years old. TB12, Chris Wynn. Get it? Stamp it on your ass, tattoo it, because it'll never be duplicated ever again. So whether you like it or don't like it, it's fact. It's a fact. There's no debating it. 10 Super Bowl appearances and a possibility of a 7th Super Bowl championship. And to beat Pat Mahomes, the next great GOAT, the next great quarterback, it would be unfreaking believable. Stop. All of you, listen, open up, get the wax out of your stupid ears. I didn't say the greatest athlete ever. The greatest athlete. Of course, he runs like a 5'2", 40. Okay, he's the greatest athlete, sports competitor ever, greatest champion. Okay, I'm not saying athletic ability. I'm saying leader of sports, champions, the greatest athlete, Tom Brady, hands down. There's no argument. Okay, you can't argue it. What he's done, Spencer just talked about in this playoff, is unheard of. None of you clowns can go out in your recreational leagues. You can play basketball. You can play baseball. You can play softball. Nobody plays tackle football. You know why? Because it's the most physically demanding sport in the entire world that you have to sign a waiver for, because people have concussions and they have long-lasting effects. For Tom Brady to do this as long as he has at 43 years old, to be making his 10th Super Bowl appearance, you can't even imagine it in your cluttered brains. It's so improbable. It's so unbelievable. This guy's inspiring men, women of all ages for generations by doing this. Nobody would have ever imagined it in their wildest dreams at 43 years old, the skinny little kid running a 5.40 in the combine, drafted in the 6th round, would be able to be where he's at right now. It's absolutely the most improbable story. They're going to be making movies, documentaries about it for your grandkids and grandkids for generations. You're watching something that you'll never, ever see again, never be duplicated. Not in your lifetime, not in your grandkids' lifetime, not in your great kids' lifetime. Enjoy it. There's no debate. The guy is the most accomplished, greatest athlete you've ever seen. To be able to lead a team, different teams at his age, to a Super Bowl championship is absolutely unheard of. Spencer the Wiz, I want to piggyback on the Tom Brady, the Patriots. Let's talk about Bill Belichick. Now, the Patriots look like it was as we sit right now, that Tom Brady was the driver of this ship. How does Bill Belichick's legacy get impacted? What if Bill Belichick, Spencer the Wiz, never wins another playoff game without Tom Brady? Let's say he coaches 4 more years and they do not win another playoff game. What happens to Bill Belichick's legacy?
Well, dynasties are only built with the correct foundation. So if he just doesn't have the personnel, he's not going to get a Super Bowl out of them. You just talked about how hard it is. Did he get the most out of Tom Brady in his time there? You have to say yes. So in my mind, does it hurt his legacy a little bit? Sure, but I still see him as the greatest NFL coach of all time, because you could go down a myriad of list of names. Like even like would Sean Vay get that many Super Bowls out of Tom Brady? Probably not. Matt LaFleur, probably. So the fact that he did what he did in the context of the Patriots is still extremely impressive. Now, who has the leg up? It's probably Tom Brady over him, sure. But I think if Belichick was with coaching this Buccaneers team, they'd still be in the Super Bowl, if that's what you're asking.
Spencer the Wiz, if you're Tom Brady, you know he loves the game. You know he wants to play as long as possible. So even, let's say he wins, you can't possibly top that. I mean, Brady's going to keep playing, Spence. What if he wins this Super Bowl and he says, I'm playing again? Wouldn't it be the perfect time at 43 to go out on top if he beats Pat Mahomes? But he's going to come back, Spence. So let's just play hypotheticals for a second. Let's say Tom Brady finds a way. This team finds a way to beat this Kansas City Chiefs team on February 7th. Tom Brady gets his 7th Super Bowl, and he comes back and plays again and gets to an 11th Super Bowl, Spencer the Wiz, and has a chance to play for 8 Super Bowl championships. I mean, is your mind not blown thinking about this? This is NFL football. We've only had 54 Super Bowls.
No, I think my favorite part about this personally, like setting aside my feelings for him, is the fact that he's having so much fun playing football. Very few guys at that age, a lot of them do it for a paycheck, and that's perfectly okay too. There's no judging there. You can make a lot of money through the game, and if you can get a few more years out of your body, you're absolutely going to do it. But it's not really about that for him. It's the fact that he loves competition. He loves football, and that's what he's doing with it. He wants to continue playing, and I do absolutely imagine seeing him on the football field again next year. And no matter how successful they are, I have confidence that he's going to go out there and put the best product on the field for the Buccaneers, and they'll be just as competitive next year as they were this year.
Well, look, I'm not saying Tom Brady is by himself carried every single team to victory. You know that's not true. He's had a lot of fortune on his side along this journey. If it's Vinatieri making kicks, if it's a referee on the tuck rule you mentioned, he's been very fortunate to be in 10 Super Bowls and to win 6. So I'm not going to diminish that. But this is so historic, what we're seeing right now. And I just say we all should just enjoy the ride, because we'll never see it again in our lifetime. Spence, let's talk about the other side of that game. The Green Bay Packers, they were down pretty handily in the first half. They were able to come back. In my opinion, Aaron Rodgers is in the conversation for top 5 quarterbacks ever to play the game. In my opinion, I think he's so talented. He's so good. I know he's only got 1 title, but I don't really put the blame on him for this one. He played pretty solid. He had a 2-point conversion dropped. Now, the one play I wish that he could have took back was, I believe it was 3rd down, and he had an opportunity, what it looked like he had room to run for a touchdown. Even if he would have got to the 2, he could have made a dive for it, Spence, and I think he could have got in personally. This has got to sting for Aaron Rodgers. I mean, a lot of disappointment here over the last decade, a lot of NFC championship games. Of course, the Matt LaFleur call, going for the field goal on 4th down. Spence, how would you dissect Aaron Rodgers, Green Bay, and what, in your opinion, looking back, what could have been done differently where they could have been the winners of this game instead of going home early?
Well, the turnover battle is definitely going to do it to you. Mental mistakes. You can't turn the ball over multiple times in a playoff game, an NFC championship game, and expect to win. Now, Tampa Bay did exactly that, but very rarely you're going to have that many turnovers in one Super Bowl or NFC championship game. Look, when they went into the season, it's not like they had a lot of weapons. I mean, of course, you have Devontae Adams, who we know is, a top 3 receiver in the league. But outside of that, they're just guys. And, they were able to mask that for such a long time this season, but it caught up to them, I think. The fact that you don't have at least a second threat when it comes to catching the football, it's not going to be perfect on you. And that's what happened this year. And every single offseason, I mean, the Packer, they picked A.J. Dillon and Jordan Love instead of giving him that extra help, probably was the reason they lost this football game. If they had one more playmaker on the outside, you telling me they had no chance in this game considering how close it was, or it wouldn't have been the thing to put them over the hump? Even just a Brandon Ayuk probably would have gotten them in the end zone at least one more time in this game. So that's what it's got to be in the offseason. I don't think it has necessarily anything to do with Tom Brady or not Tom Brady, excuse me, Aaron Rodgers. It's them. It's the team around him. He made that team the next level for the most part. Without him, a very short list of quarterbacks. I don't even know if Tom Brady wouldn't be able to make this team look as good as it did. This loss is not on Aaron Rodgers, but it feels like a lot of the blame is going to be put on him, and he might actually leave this team and have a success story similar to Tom Brady if he gets to handpick where he goes.
Well, we'll talk about that a little bit too, but very tough. Some people are talking about it, Spence, but not everybody. A lot of people want to focus on some of the calls made by LaFleur, but the Tampa Bay defensive line got to Aaron Rodgers quite a bit. And David Bakhtiari is an all-pro tackle who was lost just a few weeks ago to injury. Billy Turner had to fill in at tackle, and he was on the island a lot. And it hurt Green Bay. It hurt Green Bay a lot. They didn't bring a lot of help for him on the edges, and they got to Aaron Rodgers in key moments. So that was impactful. Of course, the turnover was impactful. Aaron Rodgers had a few drops, Spence. I don't think it was on him either. Aaron Rodgers is just an incredible, incredible football player. One of the best to ever do it. I don't know that I think Green Bay fans would be jumping off bridges and buildings and losing their minds if Aaron Rodgers leaves in the next couple of years. And he's under contract, so it would have to be a trade. I think Green Bay would be foolish, absolutely foolish, to do that right now, unless somebody's willing to give up 4-5 first-round draft picks and a very solid quarterback in return. I mean, even if it's like a Jimmy Garoppolo, I may consider that we're talking front office. As a fan and as wanting your team to do well, there's no trade worth Aaron Rodgers. But, let's just say he's got 4 more good years left. And I don't know. I think they find a way to make it work, Spence. I think Aaron Rodgers stays in Green Bay, but we all know that at the end of every NFL season, the rosters aren't going to be identical as they were the year before. So, look, everybody that loses at this point in the season, they need a little time to recharge the battery, as Aaron Rodgers does. And he talked today on the Pat McAfee show on SiriusXM that a lot of this was blown out of proportion, and you could easily see that. He's just talking in reality. There's turnover after every year. I think we're all just trying to make a bigger story out of this that needs to be. I don't think Green Bay is going to let him go anywhere. He's an MVP. He's the MVP this year without question. 40-plus touchdowns, under 10 interceptions. He's great. I just hope that, and I don't love Green Bay. I completely respect Aaron Rodgers for the great player he is. For Packers fans, you want to see them do well in this draft. I mean, they've got to put a couple pieces around Aaron offensively. You've got to have a really good draft here. If you make another boneheaded play in the first round, second round, it's going to really piss off Packers fans even more. And they're going to be wanting Mark Murphy and some of these other guys' head on a stick. So it's going to be a really important draft for Green Bay. I think they hold on to Rodgers. I think this is very much overblown. And I think Aaron Rodgers steps up again, recharges the battery, has an off-season, preseason, hopefully coming in this next season, and he'll be right back in the conversation. The Detroit Lions won't have Matthew Stafford. Chicago Bears, probably Mitchell Trubisky again at QB, Kirk Cousins for the Vikings with a defense that can't play well. So it's going to be Green Bay's division. They're going to have another opportunity to host a playoff game, if not be a top seed, and we'll having this discussion again. So it's going to be fun to watch. And like you said, Spence, you talked about what Tom Brady had to do to get to the point he's at. Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees. I mean, it's quite special. So I'm with you. I don't put the blame on Aaron Rodgers. And unlike a lot of the media sources, I think a lot of this talk about his future in Green Bay for the short term is overblown. I think he'll be a Packer for the next year or two.
Yeah, the thing is that football is probably the most emotional sport in all of the 4 major ones. So when you lose an NFC Championship game, a game you probably should have won, yeah, there's probably going to be a few upset beat writers, and anything that he says, he's going to be upset after the game. So anything he says is obviously going to be amplified tenfold. I just don't think there's enough assets to trade for him. Like, no one's going to be – everyone, of course, wants Aaron Rodgers on their team, but like you said, it's going to take like 4 or 5 first-round picks. It's not going to happen. No one's going to give that much up for a guy because you got to build out the rest of your team, and it just wouldn't be worth it at that point. So we'll see him there. But I guess the idea is if it goes south for them really quickly, like they're not winning football games next year, you might be able to get him for 3 first-round picks. And at that threshold – 3, I would probably give up for my franchise if I felt like he was the last piece needed to win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I would certainly give up the farm. I thought teams should have gave up the farm to try to get Joe Burrow last year. I think Joe Burrow is going to be a great one. It's unfortunate his season had to come to an end early because of injury. Spence, let's briefly talk about, I think this news came down after the last show we did on Thursday, but Matthew Stafford looks like he'll be moving on from Detroit. It looks like mutually they'll be looking for a trade. And I think the consensus around the NFL is Matt Stafford's a really good quarterback, and it's not his fault the Detroit Lions haven't done good. And a lot of people think whatever team he goes on will be an immediate contender. I tend to kind of agree with that, Spencer the Wiz. Now, I don't know if New England quite has the weapons to be a contender. I think they'll certainly be a lot better than they were this past year, especially they're going to be getting 6-7 guys back that sat out this year because of COVID, Spence. Talk about Matthew Stafford's possible destinations and what your thoughts are on a change of scenery for him and what that can do for his career at this point.
Yeah, it comes down to 2 teams for me. It either goes to the Colts or it goes to the Bears. Those teams are desperate to find a quarterback because those are 2 teams who feel they have Super Bowl contending teams right off the bat. We know how much talent, of course, that the Bears have defensively. Allen Robinson, Tariq Cohen is going to be coming off of injury, so he'll be back. They have everything they need. They've obviously spent a myriad of resources at getting the tight end position filled up, and we know how good Matthew Stafford can be there. And on the other side, the Colts, were threatening to beat the Bills this offseason. They were a good playoff contending team. And do I think Matthew Stafford is better than an old Phillip Rivers? I think so too. And I think he could elevate them. I think if he goes to either one of those 2 teams, they're top 3 in Super Bowl odds next season. And it'd be great to see him go to somewhere successful. Unfortunately, I don't think he has a no trade clause or anything. So it's not like he can kind of pick where he wants to go. So if he goes to a bad team, it'd be extremely unfortunate. But I don't think bad teams are going to be looking to trade for him. He's at the end of his career. They're going to be looking to whoever wants him is going to look and say, like, we just need him and we're going to go to the Super Bowl. We just need him and this, and we can go to the Super Bowl. So I'm excited to see where he goes and to see how successful he can be when he's not on the Detroit Lions.
Well, Spence, I've got to mark one of those teams off the list because there's a 0% chance that the Detroit Lions trade Matthew Stafford within the division to the Chicago Bears. So I do agree that could be a really good fit, but there's going to be a 0% chance of that happening. So as much of a good fit as that would be, that will not happen really under any circumstance. But the Colts could be a good destination. I don't see this happening, but what would be your thoughts as a Raiders fan of some kind of swap and having Matthew Stafford as the new Raiders quarterback?
Well, it's who I wanted them to trade for in the offseason when the whispers of him getting traded. So I think it'd be great. But I'm depressed as a Raiders fan because I know they're going to be terrible the next 2 years. If he went to the Raiders, our offense again would be fantastic. You just need a decent quarterback. John Gruden is so good at calling offensive plays. Would they get marginally better? They would. I mean, obviously, they'd have a lot more production out of the quarterback position. But it's not going to matter when your defense is that bad. I think the Raiders will be talked about in there, but they have too much allegiance to Derek Carr, and it's just not going to happen. It's unfortunate, but that's the Raiders organization.
I agree with that. That's Spencer the Wiz, Spencer Ostrowski. Follow him on Twitter at Spencer the Wiz. He also does a live radio show here in Las Vegas on Friday nights. It's called Delivering Sports, 7 o'clock Pacific time on AM 1400 KSHP. Make sure you follow Spencer on Twitter and get all the information about all the work he's doing in the sports shows and sports projects he's working on. Spence, let's talk about the second game on Championship Sunday. Chiefs and Bills, and the Chiefs picked a great time to probably have one of their best games of the season, as they pretty much from start to finish, aside from a slow starting first quarter, after that, they really dominated the game. They took care of Buffalo 38-24. The game really wasn't as close as a score as Kansas City scored 21 points in the second quarter. They outscored Buffalo 10-3 in the third. So 31-6 in the second and third quarter, they outscored Buffalo. Tyreek Hill had 9 catches for 172 yards. Pat Mahomes really had ill effect from the foot injury, from the neck injury. He was 29-38, 325 yards, 3 touchdowns. Probably statistically his best game of the entire year. Kansas City, certainly their best performance, possibly the entire year, as they get their first cover in almost 4 months. And I was a little disappointed in Leslie Frazier's defense, and they really seemed to do nothing. Just allowing Mahomes to go 8-9 yards at a time to Kelsey, to Hill, and they just beat them up and down the field. And Buffalo really was dominated in the Chiefs. Here's the thing. Here's the thing, Spence. The Chiefs now are gaining all of that momentum that they've had the entire year, and people will forget that this Chiefs team did not cover a game for 4 months. They're going to get caught up in what they saw recently, and I think that bodes for an interesting betting mark in how this game is going to be bet come Super Bowl Sunday. Currently, the Chiefs sit as a 3-point favorite, 3.5 some places. A lot of people think that's a short line from what they saw here recently, Spencer the Wiz.
No, to me, this game came down to Sean McDermott. He was like a deer in the headlights. Halftime is so important to make adjustments. You play a relatively close game in the first half, and they just couldn't do it. And do I blame him all the way? Of course not. Sometimes if Pat Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, and their tight end are all on the same point, it's hard to cover them. You got a guy who's going to blow you over the top, so you try to leave your safeties back a little bit to try to do that. And then, then they just go to the tight end position with Kelsey, and he just rips you up for these, looks like short gains, and then he just runs with it. And then you saw the Tyreek Hill where he ripped off that huge run. Of course, it looked like the guy was right there ready to tackle him, but he's so light on his feet. He just gets extra yards out of every single play. It's unbelievable. So it looked like it was possible to kind of beat them throughout the season, and now it looks again like they can just do anything. They're going to have a hard time against the Bucs next week. That's kind of my takeaway. They're going to run the ball a lot more. They're going to be playing there's going to be a much better game plan in place. I think the Bills can be successful going forward, and it's hard for a team that's never been to the Super Bowl since the 70s to just suddenly waltz in, especially beating off the last Super Bowl champions. But like you said, I think recency bias is going to be huge here. I think this line's going to be a little bigger than it should be. We'll see. I'm sure there's been opening. I haven't seen them yet, but I think there's going to be a lot of heavy Chiefs action. But I am not for any second, leaving out the Buccaneers in this game because sure, they turned it on for one game, but still, they just got the engine started, and we know the Tom Brady Buccaneers are going full steam ahead.
Yeah, Spence, we're going to wait till actual Super Bowl week to give our picks, but I think you're onto something here. I really do, Spence. I think Kansas City played their best game. I still don't think Pat Mahomes is 100%, but he didn't need to be. But Buffalo's pass rush has not been very good all year. They're going to get more heat from Tampa Bay. And I am not forgetting the fact that the Kansas City Chiefs have not covered a game aside from this one in 4 months. And I think, look, Kansas City pretty much wiped the floor with Tampa Bay when they played in the regular season. They were up by 3+ scores in the first half, and they let Tampa Bay get back in the game, and they only won by 3. I don't think you're going to see a repeat performance of that. I think Todd Bowles is a really good football coach. He's the defensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I think they're going to come out with a better plan. And I like if Antoine Winfield Jr. is healthy, what he's able to do with that safety position. I don't care what you have to do. Clearly, Tyreek Hill went for like 200+ yards in that first half. You can't expect that to happen again. Certainly Tampa Bay is going to have a better game plan there. And if you can find a way to make the other guys beat you, they can. McCole Hardman Edwards-Helaire. But if you can find a way to bottle up Hill and Kelsey, I think we're going to have quite the matchup on our hand. I think Tom Brady is going to be game. Like I said, in that first half against Green Bay, Tom Brady was dealing left and right. He was just on point. And, that weather was not ideal. But he made it happen. And I think he's going to be on his home field. Tampa Bay, there's going to be some fans there. The Bucs don't have to travel. And Spence, don't forget this aspect, okay? We're still in the middle of a pandemic, okay? These guys have 2 weeks. We don't know what this is going to look like in 2 weeks. I mean, these guys have to travel. It's Super Bowl week. They've got time off. We could have some big shaking news. Now, do I think the NFL will cover a lot of that up? Possibly. But I think we have to at least be aware of not getting too ahead of ourselves with people missing time, coaches missing time because COVID. We know this can switch at any moment of any day. So nobody's out of the woods yet when it comes to the COVID stuff here coming into Super Bowl week. I mean, would you agree?
Oh, yeah. I'm not betting this game. 'Cause it's always fun to bet the Super Bowl game, no matter how much little money you put on it. So, but I will not be placing my money either way until the day of the Super Bowl. Even the night before is way too soon because we've seen guys test positive in the middle of games in the NBA. I think the NFL has that a little bit better, but still, yeah, injuries can happen as well. So I think there's at least one event that's going to happen that's going to change the way people bet this game leading up to the Super Bowl in these 2 weeks. Guys could be celebrating, and that's how you get COVID right there. You're going to the Super Bowl, everyone's going out, and maybe not be the day of because you might be sore, but these guys are going to have a long time, especially for the Buccaneers side. They're home. They're getting ready for a Super Bowl, like in their own stadium. There's no, I'm going to say this unfortunately too, by the way, I'm not hoping that anyone gets sick or hurt. Of course, it just seems naturally like it's going to happen eventually.
Spence, let's stick with Kansas City before we talk a little bit about Buffalo. Andy Reid now has an opportunity to win back-to-back Super Bowls. Pat Mahomes, the same. Look, there's no arguing how sensational Patrick Mahomes is. Do I think at times people overhype him? Possibly. Do I think that his legacy and what he's done to this point would be different without Kelsey and Tyreek Hill? Yes, I do. But I don't want to take away from how fantastic he's been. He finds a way to make all the throws. This could be really huge for this guy, young in his career, MVP, back-to-back Super Bowls. Now, the only thing, Spence, I do worry that this guy can stay healthy for a 10-year career. Do I think he could win 3-4 Super Bowls? I think it's certainly possible. I do worry about his longevity staying healthy. We know he's been banged up quite a few times, but it is very hard in the NFL to go back-to-back. So the Chiefs, they weren't great in the regular season covering games. They did have the best record, which secured them the first round bye. They took care of business against Cleveland in a tough matchup, and they came back the next week in the championship game and took care of Buffalo. They've earned the right to be in the Super Bowl, and they are favorites. This is going to be quite the task, a great record, and for them to start to play their best ball in the last 2 games of the season, you couldn't ask for it any better for Andy Reid and the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah. It feels very akin to Steph Curry for some reason, just in terms of like how captivating he is when he's on the field. We know Steph Curry has paper thin ankles. He's constantly hurt all the time. I worry about his longevity as well. So we'll hopefully get him for as long as possible to just watch how good he is. I think some of his kind of loosey-goosey play is going to catch up to him eventually. It could cost them, a Super Bowl, but we say all this, and yet, look, they're here in the Super Bowl twice. They won last year, and there's no reason they can't win the game. They're going to be favored, obviously, to going into it. Hopefully he is as healthy, going into it. We don't know. So he's going to go out there. He's a competitor. It's one of the best things about him. But besides the skill, there's been a lot of skilled players who don't have the passion for the game. I think of a guy like Dwight Howard when I say that, to have the skill and the joy for the game is something unique. And he could very well and probably will have about 4 Super Bowls when it's all said and done.
That's Spencer the Wiz. Follow him on Twitter at Spencer the Wiz. If you miss any part of the Rest Stop Live every Tuesday and Thursday, 9 o'clock Pacific time, make sure you do download that Twitch app and go to LandryFootball.com, and Landry Football underneath there, the Rest Stops underneath those entities. And make sure you check out the podcast version of the show if you miss it live. iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Landry Football Conference Call, the Rest Stop underneath there. Spence, we're talking about the AFC title game. Kansas City Chiefs won the game. They will be representing the AFC in the Super Bowl against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Tampa on February 7th. The loser of that AFC Championship game, the Buffalo Bills, a team I was high on most of the year. I'm a big Josh Allen fan, a big Josh Allen advocate. I think he's definitely taken that next step to be in the conversation with a Pat Mahomes, with an Aaron Rodgers as one of the best quarterbacks in the league. He did not have his best performance of the year. Some questionable decision-making by the coaches, kicking field goals. And again, too predictable from Buffalo offensively. I didn't think they mixed up the type of runs that they should have in that running game. No jet sweeps, no wide receiver handoffs, no outside toss plays. It seemed like it was very vanilla, very predictable from Brian Daboll on that offense. But look, it's possible, Spence, that this Buffalo Bills team could be an offensive lineman, a defensive lineman, and a star running back away from maybe having that next piece to compete against the Kansas City. Can you imagine Buffalo drafting Clemson running back Travis Etienne, a guy that can run the ball and catch it out of the backfield, and then adding another solid offensive lineman, defensive lineman, linebacker? Buffalo definitely has an opportunity to be a rival or competing against Kansas City for this AFC crown here for the next couple of years.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're not going to be terrible. They will very much have the chance next year to go to the AFC Championship game. But we know how much things can go awry in the offseason or change, like Tom Brady going to the Bucs and take them all the way to the Super Bowl. But still, it's not. I don't think they're going to be losing anyone huge. They're still going to have the core of him and Stephon Diggs. But a running back would do well for them. But they also have to just change the way they play football. I think that's the reason they lost the game. They have to be willing to do a little bit of a more balanced attack. Can you be a pass-first team? Of course, the majority of football teams are. But if they can find a difference maker, at least someone they have confidence in, to run the ball maybe 15 times a game, that could go a really long way. Maybe they'll be a little worse in the regular season for it, but that doesn't matter for the most part. Unless you're going for the first seed, just making to the playoffs and probably not being, the wild card team is all it takes to change the results of these big games. Because if you become too one-dimensional, the best coaches, when it comes to the last two rounds of the playoffs, are going to sniff that out. And they got caught and they got killed for it. And plus, you got to be able to run the clock a little bit. Passing the ball and completions, they stop them running. As long as you stay in bounds, that thing keeps going down. So when they get leads, especially like in the Chiefs game, they did have a little bit of a lead. If they could just, make that game a little shorter, they can do something special, I think.
I completely agree with you there, Spence. I think you're spot on. I like Sean McDermott as a coach, but look, Buffalo did not have their best execution. They weren't at their coaching best or playing best this past Sunday. And in those big games, I know a lot of those guys are new to it, but you can't afford to not be at your best against a Kansas City team in a championship game. Buffalo maybe played their best games week 16 and 17, but those aren't against the same competition. I hope the Bills and Bills Mafia learn from this, and I hope we see Buffalo back in the future. Sprint, let's briefly touch on Major League Baseball. The Hall of Fame voting was today, and nobody will be elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame. I'm sure Brian Bravo, an avid baseball fan, has some opinions on this, but nobody in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Curt Schilling got 71%, Bonds, Clemens, a little under 68. You have to have 75% to get in. I think the Major League Baseball writers, Hall of Fame writers and voters are a complete joke, Spence. We know that Bonds and Clemens had their issues with suspicion of performance-enhancing substances, but these are two of the best baseball players ever. For them to be left out of the Hall of Fame is a complete joke. The whole process is a joke. Schilling was great in the postseason, one of the greatest postseason pitchers ever. For nobody to get in, it's a complete joke. Why even have this at this point? Bonds and Clemens, especially in my opinion, I think these guys should have been in a long time ago. I think it's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, it's the way baseball runs. They wait for somebody to die, and then they give them the Hall of Fame. It's going to be the same thing for Pete Rose. I don't know why. It's just they're not willing to swallow any ounce of pride for the guys that made their sport so great and so awesome. Look, did he maybe take performance-enhancing drugs? Did Pete Rose, make an illegal sports bet? He did. But think about, can you tell the story of baseball without those three guys, Pete Rose and Barry Bonds and Clemens? You just can't. So they deserve to be in the Hall of Fame for how great they were and the impact they had on a day-to-day basis in making the sport grow.
Spence, I couldn't agree with you more. I just think it's ridiculous. And that's why one of the reasons why the rest stop here and myself rarely talks about baseball. Baseball is a joke. I'll talk about it a little bit during the World Series, during playoff time. Baseball's a joke. Let's be honest. I mean, I know there's a lot of old baseball heads out there, but baseball's a dying sport. People don't watch it. People barely go to games. The fact that they couldn't have people in the stands is detrimental to baseball. The young athletes, they don't play it like they used to. Baseball is dying among the millennials, and this doesn't do anything to help baseball's cause. Baseball is fortunate to have some of the amazing World Series they've had as of late, and people still love the fact that baseball is so beloved in its rich history. They play too many games, and it's not the same. There's not star power. I mean, yeah, Mike Trout and a couple guys, but baseball does an awful job of promoting their stars. And for you to not respect a Bonds and Clemens, a Kurt Schilling, regardless of what your personal feelings are, you're doing a disrespect to guys that play the game. And it's just BS. And baseball is dying, and they deserve this. People don't talk about baseball on a national level. You don't hear the main talk shows talking baseball because baseball sucks. And I'm going to stand by that. I'm sorry if I hurt some people's feelings that love baseball, but this is bull crap. And this is just another reason why baseball is on the back burner of discussion. And it's on the back burner of people's television sets. They don't sit and watch it, period. Bottom line, end of story. Spence, let's talk about a sport that people have watched and do watch. And they did watch this weekend, UFC 257, the great Conor McGregor back in action.
Like in UFC, of course, I think it does make a little bit of a difference. In this case, he did punch him and knock him out, but still. And also the other big factor between boxing and UFC, they will call fights a lot faster in UFC. There's no count. If the referee thinks you're done, you're done. So that bodes well for the unders. That bodes well for underdogs a lot of the times. And Conor McGregor had just been out for so long. He was way too heavy of a favorite in this matchup. He was so rusty. He's kind of looking like a clown here at the end of his career. He already, he's such a goof, man, kind of a joke. He came out in the morning after saying, all humbled and, the fight didn't go the way I wanted it to. But when you see him in the press conferences, I get that it's a character, but he has been in jail. So it's not a full character. On some level, he is just a horrible person. So he got caught, and he's going to continue to fight, and he'll continue to be heavy favorites. And depending on the matchup, I'm not going to say I know he's going to lose every fight. I don't think he is, but I'll be interested in seeing his opponents because I may fade against him quite often.
Yeah, Conor McGregor said after the fight, Spence, that a lot of time laid off. He needs to be more active. So we'll see if he gets in the ring again here in 2021. The Diaz brothers have a chance to be coming back to the UFC. They're very popular, Spence. I'd love to see them back in action. I don't know if they'll get a McGregor fight, but certainly the talk of Nate Diaz and Nick Diaz coming back certainly has some UFC fans excited.
Yeah, UFC, has the names. They do a really great job of promoting their top athletes. Personally, I have no interest in Conor McGregor or the Diaz brothers. I like the guys who are trying to make their way up to the card, and these big names kind of just force themselves into the main ticket. Because they sell. I mean, I get it. It's a business more than anything. It's not really much of a sport. Talk to Jahai Tucker. He's an up-and-coming boxer on my show. And he talked about he doesn't actually view boxing as a sport, but as a business in and of itself. And now I kind of see it that way a lot more. These guys know the kind of money that's involved, and they know that it's not always about what is the objectively the best fight. It's about how to sell the most pay-per-views and when COVID's over and selling the most seats. And UFC is the greatest sport, I think, in the world of doing that, even though they're technically not the biggest, but that's impossible for them to do.
Spencer the Wiz, Brad the Believer, the rest stop every Tuesday and Thursday, 9 o'clock Pacific time. Spence, as we're finishing up the show tonight, we'll get into a little NBA action. Let's talk about the card tonight. It was a little bit of a short card. The shorthanded Clippers, no Paul George, no Kawhi Leonard. They follow the Atlanta Hawks, 108-99. Spence, you had a little action on the Hawks. Good call there on this one.
Yeah, I'm going for my third NBA ticket in a row. But when I saw that, I tried to bet it last night. But of course, the William Hill app and stuff, they won't put nearly any lines out until it's the day of. But still, I got it at 5.5. I was just shocked. I know the Clippers have a lot of guys, but you're talking about a rookie head coach, or not a rookie head coach, but new to the Clippers, I should say. This came out last night, that Paul George inquiry out, so not a lot of game planning time. It was actually late when it came out too, from what I remember. But Reggie Jackson leading your team, Marcus Morris, these are guys who are not dedicated to a team cause. They played okay, but at the end, none of these guys are closers at all. And that's what I was banking on. I didn't think it was going to be a blowout one way or another. I just thought when you come down to the last 5 minutes, you have a lot more talent on the side of the Hawks and a collection of dudes for the Clippers. And that's what ended up happening.
Spence, the Washington Wizards fall to the Houston Rockets 107-88. I think you like this one as well. Shorthanded were the Wizards. They did have Brad Beal and Russell Westbrook. Westbrook had 19, Beal had 33, but the Rockets get the best of Washington 107-88. John Wall had a really nice game. He had 24 points. DeMarcus Cousins had 19 and Victor Oladipo 20, but Washington gets the win, and they get the easy cover in this one, Spence.
They did, and I was interested on this. I ended up not pulling the trigger, but keep in mind the Wizards were without Troy Brown, Denny Advengia, and Rui Hachimura, so a lot of their young pieces. When it comes to the Wizards, it's just, Scott Brooks just does not have the attention of these guys in the locker room. Do I think Scott Brooks could go to another team and be successful? I actually do. I'm a fan of his. I think he's a good coach, but when you've lost the locker room, very similar to Jack Del Rio when it came to the Raiders before they made their coaching change, where you have the magical season and then it just falls apart. And sometimes it just naturally happens that way. The reason I love this game is John Wall. John Wall is, like I said in that press conference, that's kind of the reason why I was so high on them. When James Harden was going through his trade, like right before it happened, and James Harden had said those really rude comments about his team not being good enough, he said, I talked to our guys from the locker room. Boom, right there. I loved him. This guy views himself as the franchise guy for the Rockets. Now, the Wizards see him in the same light. They sure didn't, and he obviously took note of that. But I like this Rockets team to go back on it. I mean, when the Wizards are fully healthy, we'll see. I mean, they're missing 3 of kind of their biggest pieces. But still, I mean, they got a lot going for them. I like Victor Oladipo. I think they'll end up re-signing him. He didn't have his best game. I think he went 7 for 21. But still, they've made a lot of moves. They're looking to, rally behind this head coach who had been an assistant, I think, for 11 years, a really long time. He's excited to be in that position. And all these players, he has a collection of players who are on prove-it deals. Victor Oladipo, as well as he's been playing, had to prove it. He had that bad injury, and he hadn't progressed the Pacers in the playoffs at all. DeMarcus Cousins is actually getting a little bit underneath him. We know Christian Wood most likely is going to be the most improved player of the year. There's not a blatant hole on their team, and they can win basketball games. Whether or not they make the playoffs, I'm not sure, but I think they have a chance. I don't think they're dead out of the water for them. So we'll have to monitor and see how they do.
Spence, the other game tonight, the Utah Jazz took care of the New York Knicks 108-94. Austin Rivers had a great first half for the Knicks, 25 points, 10 of 10. But they got pretty much blasted in the second half, and the Jazz get another victory. Jazz playing pretty decent here the last few games after a shaky start, possibly at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, I like them a lot. In terms of the regular season, again, the proof for them is always going to be whether or not they can make it happen late. But for now, I mean, Shaq called out Donovan Mitchell on TNT in one of the most awkward interviews I've ever seen in sports history, where he said he essentially called him out for not being able to elevate his teammates. And Donovan Mitchell just kind of let it slide off, and it created an awkward moment. But there's no weakness on their team if you go down Bogdanovich, Donovan Mitchell. Rudy Gobert is one of the only players, I think, in NBA history who got his big contract and is playing better the next season. Normally, it adds a lot of comfort, but he's making it happen. I love the Jazz in this matchup. The spread was a little scary for me, so I ended up not taking it, but I love the Jazz money line, which just sounds a little obvious. But the big trend in NBA this season, while we're kind of wrapping up the NBA talk a little bit, I guess, is heavy favorites at home are killing it this season. I think they're 55%, which is like the best since 2007. So don't be afraid to take the big lines this year. Home favorites, like short home favorites, actually aren't doing so well. So I really hate actually going against those lines. But if you like the numbers and the analytics part of it, those are numbers to take a look at. What I like to do when I do sports bet, and again, I'm not a professional gambler, but I could potentially tomorrow win my 3rd ticket in a row, is you got to look at it contextually. If you just look up, who should win this game, you're going to get crushed for sure. I mean, there's so much small details in basketball compared to any other sport. Hockey is very steady. Football, for the most part, is a little steady. Injuries obviously play a big part. For the NBA, are they playing it back-to-back? Does this guy have some sort of vendetta against the team like John Wall tonight? A lot of storylines. It's a very emotional game in basketball, and you have to watch a lot. So those are my betting tips for basketball, those 3 points of contention.
Spent a couple key matchups on tomorrow's card. One of them is going to be Lakers at Sixers. That's going to be an ESPN game. Lakers 14-4 on the year, 10-0 away from home, and they're in Philadelphia tomorrow. Giving any lineup issues late? Do you have anything as far as guys that may be out of this game? And if not, how do you think this one lines up?
The Lakers 76ers matchup.
Yeah.
Oh man, this is probably my favorite game of the year, actually. These are 2 teams converging that are playing very well. Some of the losses have come for the 76ers for the most part due to COVID-19 issues. They're going to have a fully healthy lineup. If the 76ers can win tomorrow because they just got Seth Curry back, big statement win for them. They're on my radar to go to the finals this year, especially because the East is just so weak, in my opinion. The Brooklyn Nets are continually just not impressive at all. I think the James Harden trade was a massive mistake. Now, did it save Karis LeVert's life? Yes, but how can you predict that he actually had cancer on his kidney? And, I'm very happy that he was able to recognize that. But again, Karis LeVert and Jared Allen were guys who built that team. I'm talking about Brooklyn now. I have so many thoughts on them after that trade. So I'll just stick with the Lakers game. I'm going to favor the 76ers in this matchup. I just love what Joel Embiid's doing. I don't think Anthony Davis is necessarily going to be matched up on him. I think it's going to be Marc Gasol for the majority of the game. That's going to favor the 76ers very well. Tobias Harris is going to have a lot of responsibility on LeBron James, but I think just in terms of size and athletic ability, he's kind of on the same level. No one's going to stop LeBron James, but if you can get a James Ennis, a Tobias Harris on him, a James Johnson, you're going to have a much easier time kind of keeping him to below 50% shooting and probably 8 to 9 assists. That's got to be the range for any NBA team, I would imagine, defensive coaching against them.
Spent another couple key matchups. Nuggets travel to Miami to take on the Heat. Celtics travel to San Antonio to take on the Spurs. But one that I'm going to think is going to probably be one of the higher scoring matchups of the night, the Brooklyn Nets, like you mentioned, taking on the Atlanta Hawks. And Atlanta will be on a back-to-back. So that's going to be an interesting one. Atlanta on a back-to-back. It looks like you'll have everybody in the lineup for the Nets. I don't think the line's out yet, but I would imagine Brooklyn will probably be a 6-7 point road favorite.
In my mind, this is the 2 worst teams defensively in basketball. This is going to be one to watch for sure. I don't know if it's probably not going to be on TV, but still, if you have NBA Pass or you have other ways of watching it, that's the one to watch. I mean, I could easily see a 130 to 135 matchup, and that's not over. That has nothing to do with overtime. Those are like, in regulation scores. There's no talent on their teams. I mean, what's it called? The Hawks should have drafted Okoro. I'll say that to this day. And I think they'd be in a much better place. I think their team would actually just change dramatically. And Okoro's actually been pretty good offensively. But still, I would imagine that line's going to probably be set at around 235. And I'm still interested in taking the over.
I agree with you there, Spence. And look, I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight on the Rest Stop. We will be back on Thursday. It'll be heavy Super Bowl talk, NFL. We'll have some other fun stuff in store for you, some possible guests joining us as well here on the Rest Stop. And if you missed any part of the show live, check out the podcast version, Landry Football Conference Call, the Rest Stop. Also, like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Brad the Believer is what that YouTube channel's over. For Spencer the Wiz, I'm Brad the Believer. We'll see you back here live, 9 o'clock Pacific time on Thursday. Have a great night.